district attorney and a popular Republican governor equals a police state reminiscent of the 1930s in Germany. And I am not exaggerating an iota. This is the Wisconsin story to which I alluded earlier in today's broadcast. If you compare this to Watergate, Watergate is literally romper room compared to this. This is the police batter-ramming their way into homes on direct orders of a Democrat district attorney, fishing for information to use against a political enemy, and then threatening homeowners who had all of their civil rights violated, threatening them to shut up or else. The same state, Wisconsin, where union thugs trashed the state capitol in hopes of intimidating the governor into letting their money laundering operation remain in place. I don't say this with any jocularity or casualness at all. This is the kind of thing that should land some people in jail. This is a legitimate comparison to the 1930s in Germany. It would stick. This is a first cousin to what Barack Obama did with the IRS when he went after conservative groups. And it all starts because this prosecutor, this DA, happens to be married to a woman who was a school teacher who get really, really mad at the changes to her own union benefits under Scott Walker. That is literally the little germ that ignites this entire episode. A ticked-off union activist teacher married to a corrupt DA, and they then found a corrupt judge and enough corrupt police officers to facilitate every action they took, which was entirely political. There was no criminality. The people targeted here had not engaged in one iota of criminal activity. All they did was vote Republican. All they did was donate to Republican and our conservative causes. It would begin with a knock on the door after midnight. An armed police force, a SWAT unit, could storm your house, literally use a battering ram to enter your front door if you didn't answer within seconds. Most people in bed when this happened. Again, these are just Warden Cleaver families, Warden Jude Cleaver families. These are not criminals, nothing to do with any criminal activity whatsoever unless you consider voting Republican to be criminal. You didn't answer, they used the battering ram to crash into your house, scaring your kids, maybe for the rest of their lives in some cases. They would then storm in and steal every computer and cell phone they could find. They would not tell you why they were there. They would tell you didn't have a right to know, and they told you that you better shut up about what is going on and what was happening. If you breathed a word to anybody, even in the neighborhood, who had witnessed it, you would be in even further difficulty. And all of this was simply based on the political advocacy that the residents, the adult residents of these homes had engaged in. All of this is the John Doe investigations that began into Scott Walker and conservative groups in Wisconsin. They've been ongoing now for years. Scott Walker's been really strangely quiet about this. We all know what happened to him, and he's out detailing what happened to him and his family. What we didn't know was the same thing was happening to scores of his supporters and donors, all under the auspices of the so-called John Doe law, the John Doe investigation. The opponents of Scott Walker turned campaign finance law into weapons. David French at National Review has talked to the families targeted in these raids for the first time, and their stories are harrowing. As I say, this is going to print out to 11 pages if you read it online. Shouting officers at the front door in late-night, early-morning raids, one case with a battering ram, armed police rifling through and carting off their belongings, down to and including a daughter's computer. The targets were told not even to tell their lawyers. They were told not to tell their friends. They were told not to say a word to their neighbors. Now, if you happen to live next door to a house where such a storming took place, I mean, you'd wonder why. My God, what'd that family do? You would ask. That family was forbidden from telling you. They were not permitted to discuss what happened. They were not permitted to even go get lawyers. This was not the right to remain silent. This was an order to remain silent and to not, they couldn't even profess their innocence. The demand to stay silent required that they assume a public role of guilt. The investigators were fishing for campaign finance violations, supposedly, which is nothing more than a First Amendment right. Campaign donations are the equivalent of free speech. Numerous courts, including the Supreme Court, have so found. So for exercising their First Amendment rights, they were denied them. The investigations have been going on so long that there's a John Doe 1 and a John Doe 2. As Scott Walker's first campaign for governor got underway in 2010, the Milwaukee District Attorney, John Chisholm, Chisholm, opened the initial John Doe investigation under a proviso of the law that allows officials to keep their targets secret and to compel the targets to shut up. John Chisholm, the DA, a partisan Democrat, his wife was a shop steward for a teachers union, and she was miffed. Scott Walker was elected and began to implement his reforms of corrupt union activities in Wisconsin, and his wife, Chisholm's wife, literally had a cow. Went berserk. So Chisholm investigated everything possible related to Walker for 2 years and didn't ever lay a glove on him. This, everybody knows that's followed this. They threw the kitchen sink at Walker and nothing stuck. So in the run-up to Walker's re-election campaign, the first thing they tried was a recall election. And they fired everything at him then, and they were going after his supporters then. And he won the recall election. Then he ran for legitimate re-election. And that's when they went and got a judge to join this corrupt effort. John Doe entered the next phase of harassment of conservative groups. Investigators swept up personal emails. They issued wide-ranging subpoenas, including information on donors. The Wisconsin Club for Growth describes in court filings how its own activities were hindered as people began refusing meetings. Donors got nervous, and one of its key officials, Eric O'Keefe, was not allowed to explain the nature of the investigation. They literally were trying to scare and intimidate conservatives, conservative donors, conservative voters as much as they could. They wanted to frighten them and intimidate them into abject fear and silence. O'Keefe has been courageous in resisting the investigations, said that the process is the punishment. The punishment for voting for Walker, the punishment for being Republican, the process, the investigation was the punishment. The offense was backing the wrong side in this political race in Wisconsin. Armed agents of the state operating with the force of law behind them to be used essentially as a political bomb. The John Doe investigation has bogged down now under the weight of its own corruption and unfairness, and there have been a lot of court challenges successfully lodged against it. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court could soon rule to halt the investigations. And they're still ongoing. All of this is still underway in one form or another. The U.S. Supreme Court set to decide whether it'll consider a federal lawsuit brought by Eric O'Keefe and the Wisconsin Club for Growth. Wisconsin legislators are considering scaling back the law that enables the John Doe investigations to prevent future abuses of this. They got to do something, because I think this is every innocent person's fear when they contemplate running up against law enforcement. They know they don't have any power, and if they run into people that are out to get them just because they want to get them, they know they can be had. You have it all here. You have a corrupt Democrat prosecutor, an angry wife of the prosecutor, a shop steward union activist and screw teacher, and then a judge. And the judge has been successfully called out by a number of other legal authorities. She's been humiliated for her role in this, but she doesn't feel the humiliation because she's not capable of it. But to casual observers, what's happened to her in being called out is humiliation. Chisholm is the name that you need to remember, and I'm going to find the name of the judge in this case as well. But every sordid detail and the drama that is associated with it can be found at National Review. National Review Online. David French is the article author, and he's dug deep. And the details come from these families who now are speaking up. And they're doing so in great detail.